Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out Malicious Compliance. Story 1. You don't want me to work after I put in my 2 weeks, okay? So when I was in my early 20s I worked at a well-known sandwich franchise. I actually really liked my job and I would open and close. I'd also come in whenever anyone called out because I lived 5 minutes away. One day my boss hires a new person, no big deal. Except my boss kept cutting my hours more and more and giving them to the new person. I went from working 30 plus hours a week to working less than 15. Oh, and I was training them. So after a few months of my hours getting cut but me still coming in whenever called, I put in my 2 weeks. My boss proceeded to not schedule me a single hour after that. QMC, one of my co-workers who would call in regularly, didn't come in to open the store at 6 a.m. I drove by at 11 and it was still dark. My old boss had called me to ask if I could open for her. Nope, you didn't want to give me any hours after I put in my 2 weeks, figure it out. Well, I drove by that store for a couple weeks and wouldn't you know it was only open half the time. Story 2. Armored delivery driver finds out they are not above the law. I worked for a dispensary and we handled a lot of cash, so every morning and sometimes 2 to 3 times throughout the day, an armored van would arrive and deliver change or pick up the safe contents. As a medical dispensary, we had a lot of patients who used the handicap parking spots. There were only 3 for the whole building, yet the morning armored truck driver would always be sure to pull his van up sideways across all 3 spots. The morning delivery took the longest, which often meant customers would arrive and not be able to use those parking spots. After asking the driver not to do this anymore, I was told to call his boss if I had a problem. His boss said if I had a problem, to handle it myself. So I did. The parking enforcement sent 2 people to our location and when he pulled his van into place as usual across all 3 spots, they pulled an enforcement car up on either side of him and wrote him a total of 5 infractions. Shortly after we switched companies, which was probably unrelated, but I secretly think it was the small shame they felt inside after being jerks about something we all know better than to do ourselves. Story 3. Teacher, parent meeting. Edit, warning, story mentions suicide. Hi everyone, I lurk most of the time but I've got a little story to tell. I don't really know if it's malicious compliance but... well, you'll tell me. First of all, I'm typing on my phone and English is a second language to me. So please excuse any mistake, and point them out. I like to learn. To the story. A few moons ago, when I was a young teacher full of energy, I had the dubious pleasure to be the head teacher of a class of 13-year-old kids. One of them, let's call him A, was charming and intelligent but did absolutely nothing. No work at all in class. Of course his results were, let's say, poor. I tried to talk to him but to no avail. He wouldn't tell me anything about his lack of motivation. I tried to contact the parents but the phone number they listed was wrong and they never replied to my written messages. So imagine my surprise when I saw A and his mom waiting at my door during the parent-teacher meeting. The mom seemed really cold toward A and it was apparent it was definitely not a good moment for him. Before I could begin to talk about him, the mom told me, I don't care what you're going to tell me about his grades. He will be a surgeon and you will give him the grades he needs to accomplish that. Quite taken aback, I told her that it was a wonderful job indeed but also a very difficult one and with long years of study. And A seems to already be fed up with school. Maybe she should change this focus to something less scholarly and a little more hands-on where he could bloom. She answers with, you didn't listen. He will be a surgeon. Like his father and grandfather. And of course, I understood why A didn't work at all. He didn't want to be a surgeon and his mom was so horrible, the only solution he found was to stop working altogether. After a little back and forth where I said to A that he should be working in school even if he didn't want to become a surgeon, the mom began to glow red at those words. She asked me if it was possible to become surgeon while doing an apprenticeship and without going to medical college. I laughed and blurted out, yes madam, it's called being a butcher. She flew in a rage, got up, yelled F***CKU. and stormed out with the poor kid. The headmaster was within earshot and went to ask me what happened. When I told him, he laughed and told me he would call her to talk with her. Sadly, I learned a few years ago that A killed himself at 17. He probably couldn't bear the pressure. Here's my little story. As I said, I'm not sure it's malicious compliance. She asked a question, I answered, and she didn't like it. Story 4. Want me to treat you with respect, ma'am? Yes, ma'am. My mom is in the military, and sometimes when she gets upset I have to only reply with yes, ma'am, and I can't leave until I do so. It's not the end of the world, but a minor pet peeve. Later on, me and my sister got an idea. When she starts going off on us, let's salute her and as aggressive as we can yell out ma'am, yes ma'am, for a month straight, even going as far as saying random pledges and singing military songs when she's in her military uniform. I rarely see her with it on because she's quick to take it off when she gets home. She hates having to stop what she's doing so people can thank her for her service, so she would go home, change, and then go to where she needed to be. 5 months in, she's going off at us with pure anger in her eyes, and when she asked if I'm listening, I say yeah mom, I am, and when she got mad at me because I didn't say yes ma'am, the normal way, I along with my sister looked at each other and understood the assignment. We proceeded to jump out of our seats, put our hand on our foreheads, straightened our backs and yelled as long and as loud we could from the depths of our souls, yell ma'am, yes ma'am. She lost it, then started laughing until tears. She started saying, I'm sick of this shit, I can't take it anymore, stop. While still laughing, me and my sister start laughing too. A once angry mother now laughing her heart out because of a stupid inside joke her kids made. She now rarely requires us to say yes ma'am when she's mad, on the off chance that we will salute her again. Story 5. So you want proof of why the customer contract doesn't align with corporate expense policy? Fine. Many years ago I was working for a large international consulting company on a team that did physical security testing. Our contracts with customers had all kinds of provisions for peculiar expenses, but they were vague and general. The corporate expense department didn't always agree with the special conditions and were often a right nasty pain in the A. It was worse because even though we had corporate Amex charge cards in our name, and they had to be paid in full every month. One project involved attempting to gain entry to a data center and some dumpster diving. Entry to the DC involved a pack of cigs and standing around a propped open door. Dumpster diving involved a trip to the local thrift/charity store for second-hand overalls, gloves, etc., and a one-day rental at a motel so we could shower and change after. That exercise was also successful. Expenses were submitted. 1 pack cigs, denied. Hotel, denied as I lived in the same city. Clothing, denied. So now all our expenses were not paid for the month because stupid corporate. There was also a $T list if you filed expenses late, so I was going to try and argue first rather than withdraw and resubmit. Various manager escalations spread out over weeks and nasty grams back and forth. Finally, expense director said, I don't care what the contract says unless you can show me why you needed this, these will be denied. So, all of the dirty clothes had been double bagged in heavy-duty black garbage bags. Chance was that I hadn't thrown them out yet, they were fairly airtight. So I loaded them back into my trunk on the Monday of a hot summer week, and decided to show the director why late Friday afternoon. I made sure I parked on the top deck of the car park, no shade all week. On Friday, I took the bags into HQ, demanded he pay me once I showed him, and dumped the contents onto his desk. I walked out as he was screaming at me. I caught hell from my manager, with a nod and a wink, and promised not to do that again. I also insisted they change the contract terms to ensure that we could expense things that were legal but may violate corporate or customer expense policies, and that explanations would be provided to justify any departures. I later refused work that did not have this clause. So satisfying. Edited for typo. Story 6. I organized a rebellion against the professor in my political science class. This was about 10+ years ago when I had returned to the local university to finish my bachelor's degree in political science. The preface. I was a non-traditional student, so I was a little older and little more willing to question things. I was taking a 3000 level political science course, so it designed was for poli-sci majors and was required for my poli-sci degree. It was a fairly basic political science course, but the professor did some weird things. Specifically, there was a quiz every class over the assigned reading. These quizzes made up a significant part of the grade. But here's the tricky part, he seemed to be doing some sort of experiment with the wisdom of crowds. Point 1. The setup. The correct answer for a quiz question was the answer that was given by the most students in the class, a plurality, whether it was based in fact or not. Whatever the most students said was the answer was the correct answer. For example, if the question was what year was the US Constitution ratified? Even thought he factually correct answer would 1789, if the majority of people chose 1776, then 1776 was the right answer and you got credit for your answer. If you chose 1789, you were wrong and didn't get credit. This forced you to make a decision, try to be factually accurate or try to figure out what the crowd was going to do and go with that. Neither guaranteed you a correct answer. 2. The majority of the time, the majority of students would actually choose the factually correct answer. But if it was a common misconception, or the question was poorly worded, then that could lead to a situation where the crowd was wrong. But here's what drove me nuts. I was not willing to make my grade dependent on whatever the other students thought might be the correct answer. My grade became dependent on conforming to what the crowd said was true. I had no real control over my grade since the wisdom of the crowd could be anything. A class of 30 students was probably not a large enough crowd to give you a good example of the wisdom of crowds. Learning the material was not the point. Conforming to the crowd was what got you a good grade. Cue malicious compliance and rebellion. I figured out that if we all agreed to choose the same answer for every question, then we could all guarantee ourselves a perfect score on the quiz. In reality, I only needed a plurality of people to go along with my plan. As long as I could muster enough votes for an answer, then we could control our destiny. It didn't matter if A was the correct answer or not. If we controlled the votes, we controlled our grades. And anyone who didn't go with us, they were going to fail regardless of if their answer was actually correct or not. I met everyone at the door to the classroom and explained the plan. For every question, we are going to choose the first option. If it's multiple choice, it's option A. If it's true/false, we are choosing true. If we all agree to this, then we can all get perfect scores. If you decide to go against us, your answer will be wrong. 3. The first class we did this, the professor figured out after a few questions that we were gaming the system. He had us redo the quiz and graded us on the factually correct answers. After the second class we did this, the professor changed the rules. There were 2 answers that would get you full points, the factually correct answer, and whatever answer the majority agreed upon. Results. In the end, I was okay with this arrangement. I could study and give the correct answer without being penalized for not conforming to the crowd thinking, or if I made the same mistake as the majority of people, then I still got credit for it and it was a good discussion point for the class. Yes, I got an A in the class. I'm not sure if the professor ever figured out who organized the rebellion, but I did end up working with him in grad school and we got along just fine. Afterward, I always wondered, did he do this to teach us about the power of grassroots organizing? It might not have been his intention, but he turned me into a leader even though I never wanted to be one. I organized a campaign to overthrow bad leadership and we created a new regime where truth and discourse were both valued. And we learned that a plurality of voters can determine the path forward even if they are not the majority. P.S. This whole scheme was flawed and subject to the tyranny of the majority. I'm not sure how he didn't see this, it seems pretty basic to me. 1. Or maybe he was trying to teach us about game theory. I never did figure that out. 2. And let's be honest, if you knew the right answer, Trying to figure out what the majority of people would do is a losing proposition. You knew the answer, so trying to figure out how the majority of people could get a question wrong forced you to think opposite to what got you to the correct answer in the first place. 3. Not 100% accurate but close enough. In a sense we were randomizing the correct answers, so anyone who wasn't going along with our plan could really only hope for 25 to 30% correct answers, assuming that the distribution of factual answers was random. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.